yes, there have been other technological media revolutions, the ones I've already mentioned, radio, TV, etc. They did not collect and harvest data about people in the same way that these platforms do. And that is the really, really worrying aspect of it. That is the part that we have to be concerned about.
Welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today we have Oli Dugmore, formerly of Tab Media, content editor at LBC, and now the head of news and politics at Joe Media since January 2018. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, mate. I appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. Thanks for agreeing to chat to me. It was great to be able to talk to someone who's been producing such fantastic viral content. The video of Keir Starmer and the Jungle Book is just, I think I watched it like 10 times. I laughed so much.
Yeah, we have a really, really talented video editor who makes those videos, Swede Mason, and also, some of my other colleagues, Noz, Bearded Genius on Twitter, who writes the lyrics, and assorted other people who sort of assist with the motion graphic side of things. In this case, a guy called Dan Orr, who's is huge_hog, if you want to find him. Those guys, they sort of they produce those videos, and they almost certainly always travel incredibly far. And I think it's because what they utilize politicians' own words, and even though it's an edit and we've created the sentences, they're often actually quite on the nose, and they sort of speak a truth. And I think that's what the best satire does, right? You don't have to fabricate things about people. You can just use their own words to achieve that.
No, the reaction I saw from left-wing Twitter was just like, oh my God, this is what we've been saying for months, and suddenly someone else has finally realized it.
There was obviously sort of leftists who were very pro it, and then also there was a good whack of sort of other centrists or moderates in the Labour Party that were like, you're creating Tory propaganda, all that sort of stuff, which I just don't buy, because you don't have to look very far into our other edits to suggest that we're in any way like Tory propagandists. I don't think that argument holds much weight. But just by taking the piss out of someone, producing satire, producing comedy, I don't think it necessarily. It's important to have those aspects as part of your sort of political media ecosystem, and yes, and maybe they do highlight a broader truth, but if anything, that's just a reason to address it rather than ignore it.
I couldn't agree more. Like, I mean, that argument that people throw out, like left and right, where they talk about things being propaganda, or you're just like reinforcing the Tory narrative or the Labour narrative or the leftists thing. Like, I don't understand how that became part of like politics in the 21st century. Like I mean, I guess Watergate was all like Democrat propaganda. Like like criticizing someone doesn't make you like automatically part of the other team. Like, there used to be this thing where the media were like outside of that, but I guess that doesn't really exist anymore.
Yeah, agree.
So how did you first get involved in journalism? Like, what's your first when was your first foray into the world of the written word?
So I started a newspaper at my school at sixth form, which was fun, an excuse for me and all my mates to hang out on Thursday afternoons, and they gave us our own office in the sixth form centre. Maybe it was the desire to speak truth to power, or maybe it was just like quite a simple sort of status thing, where we sort of, had our own little room that looked out over the rest of everyone else in the common room. And also, a healthy stock of our own supply of sort of bourbon biscuits and stuff, which was Well, maybe, it wasn't the only reason we did it, but it certainly made things a bit easier. And then I started writing for the Tab at uni. Became the editor of the Tab at Cardiff, where I went to uni, and then they gave me a job in London, and that sort of led me to here.
Is that what you saw yourself doing growing up? Because a lot of people have asked me, is like, did you see yourself, like, I don't know, writing when you were younger? And it's always just like, nope, did not see. I did not imagine this is where my life was going.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I don't remember this, but my grandma tells me that before I could write, I used to demand that she would sit next to me, and I would dictate stories to her for her to write down, which I find quite amusing. So I guess if that is the case, then I suppose you could say then yeah, maybe. But no, I never really had like firm ideas or ideals about, this is the career I want, or this is the direction I want to go in. I did it at school because I enjoyed it. I did it at uni because I enjoyed it and it was fun. And, I guess the same reason why anyone gets involved in like any other society, or, joins bands or plays in a sports team, is because, you meet people, you make friends. And it was really, really fun. And what I quite liked about the Tab as well is that you're sort of, for people who aren't familiar with sort of student newspapers, which admittedly is quite a niche market, but the Tab often at a lot of unis is sort of the sort of the foil to the sort of more stuffy print newspapers that are run out of the SU, and it's a bit more tongue in cheek. It's a bit more tabloid. It's a bit more piss take, and I really quite enjoyed that element of it. And that sort of, I think you could draw a parallel between that and what we do at Joe, right? And the way we sort of are quite irreverent and often are sort of taking the piss out of our other media competitors. It's always been something that I've enjoyed. So I don't know. There's that that like Baz Luhrmann song, the really it's become like a list of cliches, but it's like that graduation speech. And it's like, the most interesting people are the ones who, when they're 40, they still don't know what they want to do. I wouldn't describe myself as that, because I like doing what I'm doing now. I think I'm going to carry on doing it. And if I was to do something else, I don't think it would be, like corporate or working in London. It would be doing what you do, I guess, like traveling to a foreign country and just working in a bar or something, and just, drinking rum on a beach somewhere.
Yeah.
But
I prefer Jägermeister.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's much more alpine. Yeah, that's much more alpine. But looking back, I guess you could say like, oh, it seems like this has always been the thing that you wanted to do, or you're always on a path to doing, but it never felt that way.
So do you think that the kind of sort of irreverent, tongue-in-cheek sort of style of journalism that you kind of highlighted there at Joe, and is the best way in the modern world, or at least to get sort of the attention of like Gen Zers and millennials, is like to be sort of just like taking the piss and like posting your memes and like trying to be sort of ironically not serious about it, but at the same time being serious about it? Do you think that's like the best way in like our modern media environment to get attention to, or to bring attention to perhaps more serious things that you actually want to highlight?
Yeah, so I think if you were to scroll through the Politics Joe Twitter feed, I think, obviously the standout, and often the things that do travel the furthest are those sort of viral, piss take, funny edits. Although they still speak to, they still speak to a broader truth. They still speak to something important in our politics. Then I'm not saying they don't have any value, but I think what they also serve to do is they bring people to your platform. They increase the amount of followers you have. They put eyeballs on your brand. And then if you scroll through that feed, the majority of the stuff we publish on there is not sort of, totally sort of satire or just sort of, comedy or memes. There's a lot of hard editorial too. for a publisher like us, I think it serves a purpose because it sort of it acts as that funnel, if you like. It broadens the funnel, it brings people in, and then you can show them other things and you can talk to them about broader, more serious stuff. But yeah, like the power of the meme and the politics of the meme. I mean, I'm sure it's the basis of basically every single undergraduate dissertation that's written in any politics department across the country. But like, it's true. Like, look, okay, so Bernie Sanders at inauguration with his mittens. That's been turned into merch on his website that's now been sold for millions of dollars, and is all going as is going as charitable donations. He's raised millions of dollars for charity via this meme, right? That's a clear example. It's not just like an online thing that only kids are into. Like, there are tangible, like, if you know how to use it properly, there are tangible real world benefits to this stuff. And even if it's just shifting people's perceptions, still really important. But yeah, like, obviously AOC, another example, right? I know I'm giving you American examples, but like, AOC is on Twitch. She often does Instagram lives. She has millions of followers, and as a result of this, has this huge groundswell of sort of grassroots supporters behind her. Again, slightly more sinister, but still focusing on digital and social media, looking at sort of 2016 Brexit referendum, the use of micro-targeted ads by the Leave campaign, which they dumped basically their entire budget into that. I mean, just follow the money. If that's what they're doing, they obviously think they're getting dividends from it. They obviously think it's important. And same for political campaigns now. Digital spending just is increasing and increasing and increasing. The work by the Tories in the 2019 general election, what they were doing on social was incredibly clever. You might disagree with it ethically. For example, like, rebranding your party political account as like a fact check account. But
it's awful.
The thing about that is okay, everyone starts saying, okay, the Tories this is outrageous, they've rebranded themselves as an objective fact checker account, and then it's then on all the news bulletins. But what else are they saying on the news bulletins? They're also carrying the Tory message. They're also saying the Conservative Party rebranded itself as a fact check account, and during the leaders' debate, fact checked Jeremy Corbyn's speech. Well, even if that's the limit of the news bulletin, on radio, on TV, on a subconscious level, people are still going, oh yes, the Tories were fact checking Corbyn, right on, or whatever. And so it's like, I think the way they used social media during the election campaign was incredibly intelligent, and actually often left Labour in the dust.
I mean, it's interesting that they managed to leapfrog Labour in that 2017. Like, Labour really destroyed them online. Like, they were just far smarter. It's like in every way, in the way they used the support, in the way they used adverts, in the way they used memes, and like they got like, I think they got like 1 million views on a Snapchat advert in 2017. It was insane. And I just want to take your point about the amount of micro-targeted ads that got used in the Brexit campaign to shamelessly plug my book that's out at the end of the month, in which I talk a lot about this. Like, the one of the biggest points I make is that the Leave campaign paid for 1 billion advert impressions. Like, 1 billion. And if you don't think that made a difference, as you very much pointed out, then these guys who are getting paid a shit ton of money to then spend even more money on online adverts, if you think they're wasting their money, then I mean, I don't think you've been paying attention.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and the other one that I definitely think is important is, like, Donald Trump wouldn't have been president without the memes. He literally just got memed into the presidency, to steal a phrase from Tim Pool. Like, I can't, like, the memes, like, they made his victory worth it for me. Like, it was so funny.
So this is a really good point. And I saw it when I was over in America covering the last election. We went to this Voters for Trump rally in Florida, and it's insane. There's thousands of boats, going down this waterway. And how do they all know where to turn up and what time? It's organized in Facebook groups. Like, there's this enormous power behind what they were doing, and also as well the sort of the counterintuitive way it's sort of what Bush did. Bush started it, and Trump replicated it, which was, admittedly, Bush was sort of pre-social, but if you can provoke the sort of media commentators, the metropolitan elite, which is a lazy term, but I'll use it here, whatever. If you can provoke them into sort of mocking you, or chiding you or deriding you, oh, he talks with such a thick accent, or fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, can get fooled again, whatever it is. If those people mock you, then people who identify with George Bush, i.e., let's say the 30 million Texans who speak in the same way that he does, well, all of a sudden you've got, well, they're taking the piss out of him, that who's a presidential candidate. What do they think about me? I live on a ranch. I herd cattle. What if that's what they think of a guy who's got that far in life? What the fuck do they have to say about me? And Trump replicated that, which is if all of these Twitter voices and obviously the media as well, and that then plays out on social, if you can get them to sort of, as they did, sort of mock him, deride him. And then all of a sudden, if people have been thinking I quite like him actually, or I like what he's saying about this, and then you see the sort of the broader establishment and media environment mocking him, well, it then follows. Okay, well, they obviously they must think the same about me then. Why would I pay any attention to what these guys have to say, what they think, or their politics? And I think Trump harnessed that, very intelligently, extraordinarily well. People who make him out to be like this idiot, buffoon that sort of is totally misguided. He is a very, very canny political operator. And you don't get into the White House by chance. You don't just walk in there, unless of course you're rioting on Capitol Hill, in which case, yes, you do.
Yeah.
Just walk in there.
Yeah. It's not like the police just open the gates for anyone. But talking about the power of memes, the whole GameStop saga is just insane. Yeah. I cannot, but honestly, for me, it's the most amusing and positive thing that has happened in the past year. Just the the ape strong together memes on Reddit, that they're just cracking me up right now. Is that
diamond hands,
hold the line, exactly. We to the moon, exactly, to the moon. I got my ticket. We made some t-shirts as well. Actually, I'll link it in the description. My friend and I. But that just shows you the power of the meme, and then you watch this is going to be, I think, this podcast, I'll put it out next week, so I don't know what will happen by then. That's a long time in 2021, but it's going to be so interesting to watch how strong the memes are versus basically the entire media establishment and Wall Street all pushing this narrative that it was that the Redditors have abandoned GameStop. That was the craziest thing for me. On Monday I was looking through the news, and it's just constant stories. My mom even sent me a few from the BBC. It's just Redditors have abandoned GameStop. They've gone to silver. And then you look on Reddit, and the top post on the front page, not just on Wall Street Bets, on the front page is do not buy silver. This is a distraction. You go, what the fuck is going on here? And I can't even tell, because you could get super conspiratorial about it and go, oh, they're all working together. And then you just go, are these people just being lazy? Are they just looking for the clicks where they go, here's the next GameStop, with everyone looking for the big investment opportunities, or, all the people sitting at home with not much to do, looking for, the next GameStop? Is that just them jumping on that? Or is there legit someone going, you need to tell people that, there's some room with a whole bunch of guys with big fat cigars going, yeah, we need to get them off GameStop. And
no, I think the game, I've found it, I think, fascinating as much as everyone has. I mean, obviously it's been meme driven. And I don't think you can actually look, I don't think you can look beyond that, because I think really when you examine sort of the motivations behind it, I think a lot of people, a lot of the sort of the GameStop buyers, the people who are doing this short squeeze, then most of them, they're not really doing it for financial gain. They're doing it for the fuck of it. They're doing it because it's fun, and the memes are a huge part of that. Like there's a guy on Wall Street Bets, U/deep fucking value, and he was like 50 mil up, and he cashed out I think about 13 of it, 13 mil, and he's lost some more. Like he's not doing it financially. They're doing it because it's fun. They're doing it to fuck with Wall Street, and the memes and everything that's associated with it is a huge part of it. And initially I was like, I loved it. I loved it because it was like, you know, it's sort of, call it grassroots. It's sort of the democratization of, you know, challenging the monopoly of these hedge funds. You know, they're scumbags. Like the way they, people might not be familiar with like typical shorting practices, which by the way, you know, shorting is a totally respectable part of a healthy financial ecosystem, because if you want to be able to buy things, you know, people should also be able to bet against them. They correlate. But however, it is not unheard of for hedge funds in Wall Street and more broadly, you know, other traders to aggressively short something to drive down its price and effectively and eventually collapse the company and profit from it. You know, they initiate media speculation, and for them to then be going and accusing these Redditors of market manipulation when like that is, you know, their sort of modus operandi, it's frankly laughable. What's also laughable, actually, was really funny, was seeing the sort of CEO of NASDAQ go on American broadcast media and like call for regulation, which is like, I think, you know, possibly the only time I've ever seen, you know, one of these financiers be like, yes, we need more regulation. So that tells you they're running scared, and it's really funny. But the other part of it, and that, which is sort of the next place I went to when I was thinking about it, is that there's this idea from Marcuse called repressive de-sublimation, which is basically sort of within a political system, a capitalist system, that you basically commodify any challenge to sort of the ideology or the orthodoxy is commodified and sold, and therefore you sort of render it meaningless. You take away its power. The obvious example is like communist revolutionary Che Guevara, you know, who a lot of people don't even know that about him now. He's just a guy on a t-shirt that people buy. That's the most obvious example of it. But here, you know, we're talking about, okay, well, what's happening here? We've got loads of low-level sort of Reddit guys all agreeing that they're going to sort of drive this stock up, you know, squeeze the short of Wall Street. And then potentially, you know, I guess the question is what happens next? Because if they then sort of, you know, cash out, fade into obscurity, well then there's a very obvious sort of repressive de-sublimation argument there, because all these guys who challenged the financial system, challenged the orthodoxy, took on Wall Street, well, they all cashed out, and now they live in penthouse apartments, and the system continues, and it's mollified this threat that was posed to it. So what happens next is fascinating, but I'm not necessarily all in. Like, okay, these guys are gonna sort of, you know, remedy the world's ills.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk on Wall Street Bets of like, okay, right, first we're going to take down Melvin Capital, and when they break, then it's going to be the clearing houses, and when the clearing houses break, then the whole of Wall Street's going to explode, and then you're just going to see nothing but bankers jumping from the tops of buildings, and it's like, okay, guys, calm down. Like you might get a little bit, you know, like I'm all for trying to fuck with Wall Street, and you know, I hope that this brings more scrutiny of the practices of hedge funds. I mean, like one of the funniest things about this whole saga was I saw an interview with Michael Burry, you know, the guy who's played by Christian Bale in The Big Short. And he got in on the GameStop stock early. So he's made like I don't know if he sold his position or not, or if he's still holding to the moon. But he was complaining that he was like, look, when I shorted the US stock housing market, I had to go through thousands of pages of like mortgage bonds and spend years of research and like truly understand what was going on before I spotted like what was actually happening here. And then right at the end, and then he was like, but you know, these Redditors, like it's awesome what they're doing, but like fuck them. They all they've done is see a couple of memes and they bought some GameStop stock, and now they're making the same like levels of profits that I was when I spent like years of research like looking at how to short the US housing market. Like he was mad at them for just jumping on a bandwagon.
I guess as well. There's also the Wolf of Wall Street interviews that have been going around. Jordan Bell, like the actual one, Jordan Belfort is, you know, speaking to Sky News, and you can see there's a real glint in his eye when he's talking about it. Like he absolutely fucking loves it. He loves the fact that these guys are out there fucking with the system. I guess because there are parallels and corollaries to what he was doing. Although what they're doing on Wall Street bets, I don't think is necessarily as illegal as what he was doing. But you know, I think there are parallels between the two of them, and just wanting to fuck with the system and fuck with these guys who, you know, sit on the power, sit on the cash, and wanting to get in amongst it. I think that's something they share.
I mean, I think it's important to remember that guy was literally a crook. And as much as Leonardo DiCaprio made him seem cool and accessible, he was like actually just like breaking the law in an industry where you have to do a lot to be considered to have broken the law. and like he was fucking with a lot of people. So I mean, I'm kind of like, as much as I find it really amusing to watch all the memes and like see some of his interviews with him getting like happy about people fucking with Wall Street, I'm also a little bit like, well, these guys are kind of doing it legitimately. You were like just one of the most like drugged up, horrendously corrupt guys in the history of Wall Street. And again, that's saying something. But yeah, then right now we're kind of in the middle of this period where there's a lot of stuff being removed from Facebook. Like the Wall Street Bets Facebook group was actually removed, but Facebook, from Twitter, from YouTube, and we're in the middle of this like weird period where there's like a handful of billionaires in Silicon Valley who are suddenly in control of what we are allowed to see. And I asked Hardeep Mataru, the editor of Byline Times, and she didn't really have much to say about this, and that kind of concerned me. But like, what do you make of the kind of spate of censorship or control of certain types of information? Like, what do you make of that right now?
Well, there's a huge amount to unpack here, right? I mean, the first thing to say is like you can't look beyond these companies. I mean, they have market cap revenues larger than the GDPs of you know, a significant number of nation states. They control the information, and it sounds really conspiratorial when you say that, and I'd caution against that, because, you know, for example, like I interviewed Stuart Lee a couple of days ago, and like he's just not online. Like he's just not online at all. He opened the interview and he was like, "It's nice to be with you on this." Like he didn't really know what was happening, and it was funny. But like there are plenty of people still that aren't in the same digital social media ecosystem. That's going to change. You know, as generational cohorts move onwards and onwards, you know, tech is adopted by younger people. It's going to, you know, I guess it's in the same way that you know, not everyone used to have a television, and you know, there was sort of radio, then telly, and now these things. And eventually it's going to become the case that everyone, you know, basically consumes not just their media, but, you know, large portions of their life are used in their smartphones. And I mean, part of me urges caution, because part of me is like, you know, people said the same thing about the Gutenberg press, revolutionizing, publishing and book production. They said the same thing about radio. They said the same thing about TV. And the same thing is said here, that, and I'm not saying they're Luddites, but, there is like an element of, like these arguments are repeated. However, the personalization of these of modern day sort of social media and broadly tech, because you have to include Apple. Apple isn't really a social media platform, but it is sort of the medium, and to a lesser extent Android. It's the medium by which we get there, and it has to be considered in these conversations. Amazon probably as well. And the way they harvest data, incredibly personal data, in a way that's the new aspect of it. Okay, that's worrying, because yes, there have been other technological media revolutions, the ones I've already mentioned, radio, TV, etc. They did not collect and harvest data about people in the same way that these platforms do, and that is the really, really worrying aspect of it. That is the part that we have to be concerned about, because with that data, huge amounts of power. I don't want to go to like Carol Cadwallader, Cambridge Analytica about this, but Facebook have done studies. They are available where they have peer-reviewed, demonstrated that they are able to shift sentiment. They are able to change the way people think about things, to change their mood by depending on what they show them in the news feed. And then there's the other aspect of it, which in terms of publishing is like whether these guys are a publisher or a platform. And at the moment they have it both ways. They've been able to say that they are a platform, and sort of put their hands up and say, whoa, nothing we can do about these far right neo-Nazis organizing on our platforms. Woo, what are we going to do about that? No, we're a platform, not a publisher. It's not our responsibility. But then they demonstrably are. Look at within Facebook instant articles. They are a medium of news. People publish on there. Other news publishers publish on there, but it's demonstrably a fallacy to suggest that these places aren't publishers, because they constantly are curating what every single user, down to the most microscopic nano level of data, and trying to drive engagement, drive up your usage time, show you more advertising. They're curating what you see. That's not being a platform. That's not like open season. The information's out there and you navigate around it. They decide what you see. They show it to you. And obviously that's been the big debate that's been prompted by Trump and his use of Twitter, and I guess also the other social platforms that have kicked him off. But I really do think it's going to be one of the defining issues of our time. Really good book actually by Dr. Shoshana Zuboff, which I can't remember the full title for, but it's about surveillance capitalism, and it discusses this idea. It's incredibly dense, and she does invent some vocabulary and words, one of which I think is instrumentarianism, which it makes it quite slow going and a bit of a slog. But if you can get through it, it's really, really informative. I was tricked as well, because it opens with this like beautifully descriptive like narrative of her being somewhere in I think it's the American South, and it's sort of raining and she's under a tin roof eating like jambalaya or something, and I was like, wow, like this is going to be a really good fucking read. Like, can't wait for this. And then it just descends into like the most technical, dense, really difficult to access prose. But it is a really really important, well-researched look at this problem, and not enough people are talking about it. I mean, obviously a lot of people are, but it's going to be one of the defining issues of our age, and we have to pay attention to it.
I mean, there's a lot there that I want to ask you about. The first thing I want to mention is that, like, you really like astutely pointed out that we've seen like revolutions in our distribution of information before, like starting with the Gutenberg press. You can even go the whole way back to the first, when we first invented writing things down, and Plato didn't like it. And then we had radio and television. And like, for me, the most interesting thing is that, like, for all these other modes of communication, that we established a regulatory body. We decided what the parameters of what we considered was allowed. Like, for example, with TV, we had the watershed, more crucially, actually, I think that we just decided in Britain, for example, a while ago, I don't know, I think it was in the 80s, that just like political advertising on TV was just not allowed. We just weren't going to say that was allowed, because we thought that, I believe the theory was that politics should be on the doorstep, and you shouldn't be able to campaign from behind a TV camera, or in our case now, behind a laptop. And like, one of the things that I actually like make the case for in my book is that we should just ban political advertising online. I think we should just completely stop it, because like, if we thought that advertising on television was sort of a step too far, then what the fuck are we doing letting people micro target adverts? And the craziest thing for me is that like I started writing my book because I saw all these problems in the British political system, that were like really beautifully highlighted by the Brexit vote. Like, it was a really great like case study for a lot of the issues that we have. And it has been almost 5 years since the start of the campaign, like in earnest, to leave the European Union, and we're still sat here having done nothing about it. Like, nothing. Like, they had that DCMS committee on like social media, Facebook, Russian interference, all of the different sort of threads of it. And then they proceeded to do fucking nothing, like absolutely nothing. Like, that's terrifying. Like we've realized that there's this huge problem, like with the way like social media can be manipulated. Like, as you mentioned, like there's quite a lot of studies that have shown that Facebook can guess with like pretty terrifying accuracy, like where your personality sits on the you can get like there's the ocean graph.
Myers-Briggs.
Yeah,
or Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, and like they can assess with pretty accurately that like where you sit on those particular scales. They can. There's a couple of studies done, and the names of them escape me. But like on there was the runoff election. I think it was in. Oh my goodness! It was with Roy Moore.
Is it the one
in America with Roy Moore, the guy?
Oh, right, yeah.
Trump was behind. Anyway, so they did these guys did like a whole bunch of studies on that, and they showed that like they believed that they could like depress the turnout of Republicans, or like change the potential voting of like sort of independents who were leaning Republican, or increase the turnout of Democrats, just based on the media diet that they were showing people in adverts. And like even by a couple of percentage points, like if that's accurate, like we need to do something about that. like
yeah, definitely. But there's was it Alabama?
That's it, Alabama.
Yeah, no, definitely. And look, there's also there's also a liberal bias to these platforms. Like, you can't look past that. Like, and admittedly, it's been a pretty extreme example of it in America, because the figurehead of the Republican Party and sort of the right wing politics of the country, literally, it's like whether something's truth, whether something is true or a lie, it's like it's apples and oranges. He's just like he doesn't distinguish between the two, and that's a really difficult thing to moderate, mediate. How do you go about regulating or controlling that? And like, I'm not pretending I have like answers to those questions, but there is a liberal bias. Like the people in Silicon Valley, again, being in America and like being around these kind of people, particularly in New York, that they are like, especially by UK standards, they're like super left wing. Like, the sort of their adoption of, so they would call it sort of social justice, being progressive, which I think in the UK is more intersectionality and sort of intersectional identity politics or whatever. Like it's really strong over there. Like it's a real phenomenon, and it's not just. I think we need to be careful of being like, okay, like these platforms have a responsibility to sort of, moderate the like lunacy that was coming out of the Trump White House and the Republican Party at the time, and then the enablers that have followed, like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, and the way that they've sort of pandered to these ideas. But like these platforms, like they're not neutral. They're not objective. They have their own biases. There's some really good stuff actually on AI, how basically like even if you can create sort of a deep learning algorithmic thing that'll inform itself and adapt and shape and self-teach and eventually get to that sort of state of higher learning, there's a pretty compelling field of study that demonstrates that like even like the biases of the people who produce the original code will inform the AI. Like if you don't have enough women involved in the conception of the original code, if you don't have enough ethnic minorities, people of different political persuasions, then the sort of the implicit human bias, the subconscious that you can't you don't know you're doing it, but in everything you do, the way you think about the world informs how you interact with it. And even if you think you're doing your absolute optimum best to code totally objectively to create this sort of perfectly neutral, chaotically neutral AI, your biases are still going to be present in your work, and it could potentially inform the AI. And the same thing holds true in terms of these tech platforms. The biases of the people that work there, and there is an orthodoxy. It is left wing, it's liberal at these places. You can sort of see that in the sort of the name, is it James Damore, the guy at Google, with that memo he sent around?
Yeah, and then he got fired, and then about a month later, the Google CEO said, or the CEO of YouTube literally said what he wrote in his memo. Like that was the James Damore story was insane. I felt so bad for the guy. Like I really did. Like he wasn't trying to like bring attention. He wasn't trying to be controversial. Like I think someone said, I can't remember who it was, but they were like, look, he's an engineer, and they asked him for feedback. So he went away, he looked at some stuff, and he created the feedback. Like they weren't actually looking for feedback, but he went away and he put together some stuff and went, hey, maybe this is how like men and women might be like slightly different in the way their minds operate. And like, here's some cool ideas about how we might get more women into tech. And then got vilified as a horrendous sexist. So I kind of felt bad for the guy. But I mean, there's a great line in that new song, "Fake Woke" by Tom McDonald, and it said censorship's a problem because they choose what they erase. And I think that really speaks to like what you're talking about, because if they were to come up with guidelines that like assessed like what content was all right, and then they applied it equally across the board, then I don't think we'd be having the same problem as we are now, where like it seems like sort of very arbitrary what they decide is okay and what isn't. Like they can take Trump off Twitter for inciting violence or inciting the riot, and yet there's like murderous dictators that still have a Twitter account, and you just kind of go, well, I mean, I get why you remove Trump, but like then why is like X, Y, and Z all still allowed on your platform? There's a correlation here as well to the Wall Street Bets Reddit stuff, because there's this that some of the apps that suspended trading on Robinhood, you could still buy shares in arms manufacturers that create the bombs that are dropped on Yemen. You know what I mean? It's like you always have to have a degree of skepticism about the motivations behind stuff, and if the ethics of it are real, or if there's sort of naked pragmatism
about it, and I think oftentimes because of the nature of human beings, it's often actually the latter.
I mean, I feel slightly proud. Like I started putting this stuff on YouTube like a couple months ago, and then I just had my first video removed for talking about something. I'm not going to mention it so that this doesn't get removed. But I was talking about something. No, I'm a little concerned because my book's coming out, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, because if I get flagged again, then I can't post for a while. But I got it removed for it. They didn't tell me exactly, but it seems that it was something that I had referenced that was literally in about 5 or 6 different major publications. And I was complaining because like a video of about a similar thing had also been removed on YouTube. And I was like, hang on, how can you do this? Like it's in like major publications. Like why can you say that this is not okay? And it wasn't anything that I feel like was like majorly controversial. But yeah, it's confusing sometimes, because I think it's the lack of accountability that terrifies me, and it's the same as like those like a lot of apps actually suspended trading on GameStop, on AMC, on BlackBerry, and Nokia, all just those 4, and yet like there's no recourse. Like for there's no way to like voice your grievance and have someone address it. Like at least like people can say, oh, we don't want the government controlling this sort of thing. And you go, well, okay, right, fair enough. I understand your fear of like government tyranny. But like the point is that we have the recourse to like get rid of them and change it. Like if we vote them out, like that's like, it might not be a perfect system. It's definitely not at the minute, but like at least we have that option. Like, I mean, I think what Trump showed actually was that, and what Jeremy Corbyn almost showed, and what Brexit showed, was that like if people are legit like that angry at the system, they have a way to change it. Like you might not like the fact that we left Europe. I really hated it at the time. I'm not sure how I feel about it now, watching the EU be so childish about the vaccines. But like there is at least like a recourse. Like that's why people created like the democratic systems that we have now, is because you could at least do something about it. Like when Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or Robinhood or anyone like stops you doing something that you believe you should be able to do, like, okay, yeah, you can leave their platform, but like not everyone's going to do it. You don't have any vote. You don't have any say in it, really. And aside from like voting with your feet, as the free marketeers like to say, like you don't really have like some way to get justice. And yeah, I think that's the we're really going to probably have to have some sort of conversation about like how we classify these big platforms. Like you said, like they're not a platform, they're not a publisher. And we probably need to figure out where we stand on them. Like, what do you think about the idea of like a digital bill of rights?
That's complex. I'd entertain it. For me, one of the initial, it's difficult, right? The fact, one of the founding tenets of the internet is that it is free, open, minimal censorship, is that it's free, it's open, there's minimal censorship. Those are sort of the founding principles of it. And then introducing a Bill of Rights is like, okay, well, is this legislation right? Do you want to control this thing? Who would write it? What would the rules of it be? It's an interesting idea for sure. I guess the way I would sort of the way I'd talk about it would be in terms of, codified constitution versus an uncodified constitution, right? And I think you can pinpoint a lot of the problems, for example, in America on its written constitution. I think one of the great things about our political system in this country is that we don't have one. That you can adapt, you can shift, you can change to the sort of the political circumstance, the reality that you find yourself in. And I feel like on a place like the internet, which is sort of in exponentially changing, expanding, and really there isn't any one set path that it's going to go down, and the way we think about things now compared to where they're going to be in 5 years' time. I mean, people will think that this concept of what we're doing now, podcasting, might even be rendered irrelevant with by that time. And if you have a codified document that is sort of responsible for managing that, I think you could very easily quickly end up in a difficult place, a trapped place. Equally, do I think there should be some level of legislation against things like a snooper's charter, like the massive espionage being conducted by the NSA, monitoring basically every single piece of internet communication that exists. If you think that the conversation you're having is encrypted, I mean, it outside of like very few like select end-to-end private services, most of what you think is not. It is not. That they are watching, they're listening. Being protected against that sounds fantastic. Limiting the level of data harvesting that these social media apps can do, also in favor of that. How do you I get, and I appreciate there's a paradox here between me saying I'm sort of against codifying it, but then I think of it like how else do you legislate or protect against it? Is there any way of doing it without that physical codified documentation of digital bill of rights? I don't know. It's an interesting idea. I don't know if I have a specific, if I'm pro or against it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're meant to have politicians, is to make these difficult decisions. But I guess I don't really believe in their capacity to be either like objective or intelligent enough to figure out what the right decision is. I'm far more in favor maybe of the idea of citizens' assemblies on these kind of things. I kind of have a bit more trust in ordinary people, strangely enough, than I do in politicians.
Yeah, me too.
Which is weird. I never, like, if you said like 6 years ago, like, Josh, you're gonna believe that ordinary people can make better decisions on very complex topics than politicians and our elected leaders, I'd gone, is that a good idea? But I guess now I kind of feel like politicians aren't any smarter or better qualified, and are probably more likely to be corruptible than the ordinary person on the street, especially if you're just doing it like picking them out of a hat, like they're meant to for a citizens' assembly. But
that's one of the big arguments for me in favor of the House of Lords, actually, which is something that I'm not enormously in favor of, sort of hereditary titles and people governing by birthright, but it allows for the appointment of experts, people who have made their career, their life's work. They might be, I don't know, marine biologists, scientists, business people, farmers. I mean, like people who actually are like experts in a field of work. And I think there's enormous benefit of having those people involved in governance. To be able to provide an expert's view on certain bits of legislation. I think that's enormously valuable. Those people also just exist like across the country more generally, and you can also access them by things. If you have a citizens' assembly of, let's say, 100 people, like, you are going to end up with some people who literally are like top of their field, have real expertise in things and are able to analyze and contribute to them. I guess. Yeah, but then, how do you put those people in there? How do you get them in there without any kind of democratic accountability? Is obviously the massive trade-off there.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's not. Who would have thought governing a country was easy, or was difficult even? Who would have thought it could be difficult? But okay, so Oli, final question then. Have you got any predictions whatsoever for 2021, or are you just like leaving that blank?
Okay, well, look, political predictions are generally a fool's errand anyway. More broadly, I mean, I hope that we sort of we get back to gigs, we get back to live comedy, we get back to sport, we get to socially interact and engage with each other, which is something that, you know, I'm certainly missing. And I think also as well, there's this possibility for there to be a sort of broader, wider cultural revolution that can happen because of what we're currently experiencing right now. I think it's inevitable that something, you know, there's going to be this sort of explosion of creativity to come. I look forward to that. Whether it happens in 2021, I don't know. Certainly hope so. It's all reliant on what happens with sort of vaccination, the rollout of it, and then, you know, what degree of normalcy we return to.
Yeah. Well, here's those all sound like wonderful things. I look forward to it. And yeah, so it's been a pleasure, man. Thanks very much.
No, Josh, it's been a real good chat. Thank you for having me on. I'll happily come back.
Yeah, well, hopefully, like my plan is, like my plan before this year was to be looking at already moving to London this year, but I'm not sure, last year even, but I'm not sure when that's going to happen. But when I eventually when the world sort of sorts itself out and I can get myself there, I'll get a studio set up and we'll maybe get to do this in person.
Yeah, that'd be sick.
Thanks so much for listening. If you haven't already and you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast and to our mailing list. And don't forget, my book, Brexit, The Establishment Civil War, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. You'll find the link in the description below. Until next time, thanks so much for listening.